Hi everyone, today we're going to be reviewing another subscriber from here on the channel, their candles that they sent in for some feedback and some review. And this is coming from Kindled Harmony. I have a little bit of extra excitement here because there's only a couple of these reviews left that have been waiting for a super long time, which means I have finally almost caught up. So hopefully some of this insight and feedback is helpful to those that send in their candles, but also to everyone else who's watching, because we all do use a lot of the same or similar material sometimes. So not only is it helpful for one candle maker, it can be helpful to everyone that's watching. I appreciate you all for being here and watching these as always. I started doing these about a year ago. You all seem to really enjoy them. So I will keep doing these as long as you guys keep liking them. Thanks again for being here. Let's go ahead and dive into today's review. We're going to start off with the visuals, looking about the vessel, the labels if there is one, talking about the wax, what we can visually see. We'll talk about the wick. We'll smell the fragrances, all that kind of stuff we can do before we actually light the candle. A lot of you always wonder how these things are shipped to me and what I recommend. Well, this was done really, really well. Every product is in its own packaging. Not to mention it's surrounded by plenty of packing peanuts. I would have no concerns about shipping, so just want to get that out of the way. Good job so far. So as you can see, we've got a lot of different things here. I'm not entirely sure what we've got. It looks like we've got a couple candles for sure, maybe some wax melts, a cute little sachet with some matches and a business card. But before we get into more of these products, you can see that we have a few different things here. First, it looks like we have another branded custom candle care card. Basically just has some tips on burning, trimming the wick, and storage. And this is just a thank you card from the owner, the candle maker, Shanika. I appreciate the kind feedback, and I'm glad you're part of the channel. All right, now the last two letters here. We have a before and an after, assuming that I'm showing this correctly in the camera. Looks like it. If you are new to these reviews, the before letter, the candle maker gives me some information to start with. Maybe a little bit about their background, their history, why they got involved in candle making, maybe a few things about the products themselves. And then this after letter is more for fun. So while we're doing this testing and review, I'm going to give you some feedback on what I think the type of materials we're using, like what kind of wax, the type of wicks, all those kind of things. And then after we've tested the candles, which is all done right here in the same video, then we'll open this and see how close I was or how far off I was. So that being said, let's start with the before letter. And it says, basically, thank you for taking the time to test the candles. I do offer a blend of variety of waxes in different proportions in-house. All of these candles contain some type of blend of soy wax, coconut wax, beeswax, and palm wax to varying degrees. Oh, this is fun. All right, so she left some questions here. I need to get a pen. All right, so she says, 2 of the 3 different candles contain the same wax formulation. Which one is different? All right, fun game. So we can't answer this yet, obviously. And then she says, what size wicks are in the 14-ounce candle? She asked a couple questions for herself, and she's looking forward to what my answer is going to be. She's asked herself, which fragrance does she think I will like the most? And then also, which wick and vessel combination do I think I will like the most as well? This is going to be a lot of fun. We will get back to this after we've opened all these products and had a chance to test them. Okay, so let's start with this little guy here. I'm assuming this is just a wax melt. They are sweet sandalwood wax melts. It's not one of the ones that are overly perfumey, so I like this. I'm not a huge sandalwood fan, so if that's her guess on that letter, sorry. I'm not a huge fan of sandalwood. I like it more as a mixer, not by itself. Soft, I would definitely say that's got some soy and coconut in it for sure. A little softer than normal melts are. All right, what do we want to do here? Eeny, meeny, miny, melt. This one is called Adventurous. All right, well, love the vessel. This looks like an aura type vessel from Makesy, which used to be called Wooden Wick. I think the fact that there is a wooden wick, tube wick in the middle of this candle would lead me to believe that probably all of her materials so far are probably coming from Makesy, which again used to be called Wooden Wick for those of you that are new to the industry. And the label, let's talk about that real quick, is kind of a textured linen label. I'm not entirely sure exactly what type of paper it is, but it's not a standard regular paper. And the information on this matches the information that was on the label on the outside of the box. She actually includes the date that it was poured as well. So if the camera will show it here, it says the name of the scent, hand poured, natural wax candle, custom blends. And then if you turn it over, it says net weight 14 ounces, pour date 11/8/2021. I would say there's some pros and cons to doing that. I think it's unique and I like it. It's almost like a made date, and I think that adds something. People like to know when this product was made. That's pretty cool. The drawback is, unlike candle makers, many customers don't know that the longer a candle sits, it can actually become better. And so if a customer sees a candle that has sat too long, they might think that it's not a good one and they might not want that candle. And so they treat it more like an expiration date in a sense. So I don't know that could backfire a little bit. And so I'd say that would be the area of concern for me for putting that on the label itself. But otherwise, it's kind of a cool touch. So I definitely prefer this fragrance. Again, I don't know what it is. It just says adventurous, but I like this one a little bit better. I wish I could tell you what it is though. It has some of those outdoor notes and even something kind of like a sandalwood, a little incense. Definitely some sort of like pine or birch fragrance in there as well. I really, really do enjoy this one. I hope this one is strong when it's burning because I love the fragrance. All right, as you can see, the top of the candle. Now this candle was shipped a while back, and anytime candles are shipped, the weather can have an effect on the way it looks when it arrives at the surface. It can be a little wavy or bumpy. That's because the wax moved around a little bit if it's softened up. And the candle's been sitting a while waiting for me to get to the review. So I don't expect these things to look perfect, but I imagine at one point it did. Speaking of the wax, just kind of feeling it here, the texture of it, I would guess, and I know the letter already told us a little bit, but my first guess here would have been for sure some soy and coconut. It has a little bit of that, just that kind of greasy, soft, yet sort of textured top. Anyone that uses soy coconut blends, you probably know what I mean. However, it is a little bit firmer. So she did mention that there is a little bit of beeswax and palm wax in it. I would not have guessed palm wax, especially not being able to see the side of the wax itself. It's hard to know. You can't see all the characteristics, but I definitely could see a little beeswax in this to help firm it up. Now this wood wick, if you've never seen one before, it's called a spiral wood wick. And they come from the same company, Makesy. And the difference in this is the wood wick is very thin and it's shaped like a tube. So I was saying spiral, tube I believe is what they actually call it. And it burns a little bit different. It burns this kind of round, robust flame. It looks really, really neat. It's more rounded rather than wide like a standard wood wick. So I love the way these burned when I've seen them burn successfully. So I'll be anxious to test this one out. All right, let's move into the one wrapped in the honeycomb wrap. I really love this vessel. First of all, it's kind of a smoky gray color, and it also has a nice cork lid on it. Very creative. I do have a few jars like this. I've always been partial to this look. I really like it. This one is called Fresh Citrus. Definitely smells like citrus. I would say mostly lemon, a little bit of orange. I really do love citrus fragrances, but so far I prefer the adventurous one a little bit more unique, a little bit more complex. This one you can see is a standard wood wick with a booster wick. I have no idea if the camera will actually pick that up or not, but it's a tiny little strip of extra wood in the middle, which gives it a boost. It's gonna make the flame burn a little bit hotter in the center, and it gives it a little bit more fuel to the flame to keep it burning. Some of your more viscous waxes, like your soy waxes, actually need that to burn better. So not surprised to see that in here as well, especially if there's also beeswax in it. The size of this one looks to be about a 3/4 inch width. And I would say this is a 0.04 thickness with the booster, which is this is a very large wick. This is the thickest that you can get. Plus it has a booster and it's 3/4 inch wide. So that's a big wick, but it might need every bit of that. We will see once we get testing. Last but not least, we have Distinguished. Love the name. Actually, I like all these names. Oh, all right, a big, nice, fancy black 10. All right, this definitely comes from Makesy or Wooden Wick. So I'm assuming everything here is coming from the same supplier. Couple different unique ones here. First of all, large, very large diameter. And so we'll talk about wicking last. This one smells sort of like the wax melts. I'm certainly picking up some vanilla in there, but it's some kind of woodsy note as well. I'll get to that sheet and talk about my favorites here in just a second. So let's talk about everything else. This wax certainly seems different to me. And we'll get into it again when we get back to that letter, but this is a much harder wax. It's not near as soft as the other two we looked at. It's also pulled away a little bit more from the outside of the 10, which firmer, harder waxes will do. It doesn't have near as much of that greasy feel. It's more of like a matte feel. It has a little bit of softness, but it certainly seems to be like a different wax compared to the others. I know talking through the camera, you don't get near as much of an idea of what I'm talking about when I'm feeling the candle. So I'm doing my best to try to explain it with words. Obvious elephant in the room here is the wick. This is called a ribbon wick, I believe. Wave or something. I don't remember exactly what it's called. And the only place that I know that you can get them as a small candle maker is from Makesy. Very cool look. And the benefit of it in this case is they don't need multiple wicks in this vessel. It's a large vessel. Normally you would need 1, 2, 3, maybe even 4 wicks on this one. Probably 3 if you size it properly. Wooden wicks already generate a decent amount of heat, and the width of the melt pool is much larger than standard wicks because wooden wicks are wide. Well, this one is even wider and it spirals. That's going to give good, even heat distribution to various parts of the candle. Plus, it's just a cool looking flame. I can't wait to see it and show you guys what it looks like if you've never seen one of these burn before. Spiral or wave or ribbon wick. It's not ribbon. Oh my gosh, I've been saying ribbon wick. There actually is something called a ribbon wick. And this isn't it. In fact, I don't even know if they make them anymore. But this is not a ribbon wick. That's a different kind of wick. Anyways, enough talking to myself. I'm super excited to try this wick out and let you guys know how it burns. I do feel bad that it's taken me this long to get to them. But like I said, I'm very happy to be almost caught up. All right, so I'm going to be testing these candles. And I'll be gone for like a split second. You won't even know I'm gone. And we're going to talk about the results of those tests. I'll show you some footage. We'll talk about how they burned. And we'll get more accurate with some of my guesses. But before we do that, let's go ahead and go back to this letter and answer a couple of these questions. The first question is, 2 of the 3 candles contain the same wax formulation. Which one is different? That is obviously the large 10. There's something wrong with this pen. Okay, well, I don't know. And then what size wicks are in the 14-ounce 10? I don't know the sizing on one of these spiral or wave wicks. I would say a 0.02 as far as the thickness goes, but I don't know what that is or if that's what they call it. 0.02 carry the 1 divided by 3. I don't know. As far as the length of it, I seriously doubt they call this a 2.2 inch wick. So I don't know how to answer that question. I don't use these wicks. I don't really know the sizing that they use. I'll just leave it blank, I guess. She was curious about my answer to a couple of her questions. Which fragrance does she think that I would like the most? My favorite was definitely Adventurous. So that's what I'll put down. I'm assuming in her after letter, we're going to find out what her guesses were. So that's fun. This is kind of nice. It's not me just making some guesses here. Which wick vessel combination does she think I will like the most? I'm going to go with Fresh Citrus, which is this one. This is the vessel that I liked the most. It's like the smoky gray color. I like the cork top. I just think this is the coolest looking vessel. So that would be my guess. I will write down the Fresh Citrus with cork. All right, stay right there. I will be right back and we'll talk about the testing. And while I'm doing that, if you wouldn't mind taking a few seconds, a couple quick clicks to subscribe to the channel below if you're interested in anything else about candle making and reviews and candle resources and candle business and tutorials and how-tos and tips and so on and so on. I would really appreciate it. Give this video a thumbs up. I'll be right back. All right, so what did we learn after about a week testing these candles? First, let's start with the things I like the best about the candles, and then we will transition to some of my feedback on things that might use some tweaking or that you could work on improving, which, again, we all have these about our products. So with that in mind, the first thing I have to say is that I lost some of the footage of me testing. I have some, and I will definitely show it, but for some reason or another, I don't know if it just didn't save properly to the SD card or what happened, but I did lose a little bit of the footage. However, that's also the good thing that I need to point out about these candles, is the lack of additional footage really doesn't play a huge part because these burn pretty much the same throughout. So the footage you do see is pretty reflective of how they burn the entire way. We'll talk about that as we get into each product. And once I'm done talking about how each of these candles performed, I will refer back to some of the guesses we made at the beginning, and then we'll open that after letter to get a little bit more information. So let's start off with the one that I chose as my favorite scent, and that was the Adventurous candle. The Adventurous candle was the one with the round tube wick or the spiral wick in the center, and still to this point, it is my favorite of the fragrances. However, it was also the weakest of the fragrances. So it's a large diameter. I thought it was going to throw pretty well. In fact, it was pretty easily overtaken by some other fragrances that I like to throw in as well. So every once in a while when I'm testing fragrances in a room, I like to see how well it holds up when other scents are introduced. So I turn on like a wax melter, and the wax melt fragrance overtook this one. And then I have some other candles where sometimes the fragrance from those in other rooms will actually overtake the one in the current room. So from that regard, the hot throw was not great on this one. However, it's still my favorite scent of the bunch. As far as how the wick tested, however, it was probably the best of the bunch. It started off a little weak, or for someone brand new to candle making might have thought, well, this one might struggle a little bit. First couple burns had a little bit of a ring or hang up on it. Pretty normal though, especially with some of those waxes that can be a little tougher to get a full melt pool on the first couple burns. However, by the third burn, that had pretty much completely caught up. It's also a 4-inch diameter jar roughly, so it can really handle burning for 4 or 5 hours at a time anyways. And the cool thing about these wicks is you get this round flame. So rather than your standard wide wood wick flame, you get a nice round kind of base on it, and it's almost a tube-shaped round burning flame. It's really, really cool. and it did a really, really good job. It burned evenly. These wicks don't necessarily really trim themselves, so you do still have to kind of trim off with your fingers the burnt end or the charred end of the wick, just like you would with a normal wooden wick. But other than that, it did a really, really good job. It was hot throw that was the biggest issue with this one, but that's probably just a fragrance oil thing. So overall, this was the best performing overall candle with just a below average hot throw. So I don't know that I would change anything about this candle, the way it's wicked or anything, other than experimenting with some additional fragrance oils. I don't think it requires any change in wick, and I like the look of the candle. I thought it was just a good overall performer. The next candle was the smoky gray candle with the cork top, and it was the one with the standard wooden wick that had a booster wick in the center. And I want to do this one next because I think it's slightly better performing than the next one. But it was also my favorite looking of the candle. I just really, really like the way this one looked. Overall favorite style, vessel, and everything. The scent is good too. It wasn't my favorite of this bunch just because I think the adventurous one was a little bit, more unique of a fragrance. However, you're never going to go wrong with me and citrus or lemon. So it was still an excellent choice. And I have a feeling she probably thought this would be my favorite fragrance of the bunch. Let's talk about hot throw. This one was great. It was very, very good hot throw, strong throughout. Didn't really have any issues from top to bottom with fragrance throw on this one. The areas that this one could use some improvement is on the wicking. The flame itself was good. The problem is it was just too much. So my suggestion on this one would be to either remove the booster completely and see if it still performs pretty well, or leave everything the way it is, but come in as a smaller wick size. So this one looks to be about a 5/8 inch of a width on the wick, and I think this one needs to come into probably a 1/2 inch. I would start with that, and then and see how that works for you. And then you might need to keep tweaking. Wood wicks can be kind of difficult or tricky to size because there's different ways that you can play with the sizing. A cotton wick, for example, if you're using a CD wick, and you're using a CD12 and it's too much, you go down to a CD10. If that's too much, you go down to a CD8. It's pretty easy to adjust sizing. Wood wicks, you got to consider the type of wood wick, the thickness of the wood wick, the width of the wood wick, whether to add a booster or not. There's a lot of variables. So my recommendation when you're using wood wicks is to only mess with one of the variables at a time. So in this case, I would probably leave everything the way it is and just come in and narrow the width a little bit. Other than that, I think this one, it could be very easily fixed. And once it is, it's going to be probably my overall favorite candle of the bunch. And last but not least was the big bowl that had the wave wick. And really, really cool looking candle. The fragrance was my least favorite. I'm just not a personal fan of that type of fragrance that I talked about in the first. It had some kind of sandalwood-ish kind of vanilla notes. I'm not entirely sure what it was. Maybe we'll find out in the letter. But it was my least favorite of the fragrances. Again, however, that is personal preference. So let's talk about the way it burned. So when I first lit this, and I think you'll see this in the footage, gorgeous. It had this awesome, wavy, perfectly sized wooden wick. It was burning great. The hot throw was tremendous on this. With a bowl this size and a flame that big, you would expect, because of the large melt pool, that it would be a good hot throw, and it certainly was. So it started off fantastic. I thought this was going to be easily the best candle of the bunch. However, the longer this one burned, that flame became way too much. And so the entire bowl of wax was liquefied just in a couple hours. And I don't mean just the top melt pool. I mean the entire bowl was just nothing but liquid wax. Now it is a shallow bowl, so you're going to get that sometimes, and that happens, especially if it burns for a long time. But not even 2 hours in, the entire bowl was liquefied, and the flame was very, very large, and it was kicking off some smoke and some soot. And the problem is, with these kind of bowls, you notice this one doesn't have any feet on it. And when you don't have any feet or raised bumps on it, it really starts to run the risk of damaging the surface it's on. And I put this on a surface to test for that, and I was keeping an eye on this. So I didn't want to put this on a coaster or anything like that. I wanted to see what would happen. And sure enough, it got very, very hot. If this would have burned even just another hour or 2 hours, it would have damaged the surface underneath. And so my suggestion would be, if you're not using vessels with raised feet or bumps on them, to definitely make sure that your customers are aware to burn these on something safe. However, a lot of that problem could be avoided if the size of the wick was more optimal. In this case, it was just too much. So if you want to stick with the wave wick, I would shrink it in. It looks to be a good 2 to 2.5 inches wide, which it is a big bowl. I would probably cut off like a third of this. You won't get as fast of a complete melt pool, but the candle longevity will be better, and it will perform better overall. I don't use this particular type of wicks, and I definitely don't use the wax combination you're using, so I can't give you specific guidance on exactly what you need to change, but my advice on this one would be to experiment more with the wicks. I think that the single wave wick could work if it's sized properly. If not, you might need to experiment with a couple smaller ones instead. But this one's just going to take some more experimentation and some testing to figure out what you can come up with. And again, from the naked eye, after you first burn this, even after 20-30 minutes, it was looking amazing. And so if you just stopped your testing there, you would think everything was great. But again, as I burned it longer, it just became too much. Not only for mitigating the risk of damaging a surface, you'll just improve the length and the quality of your candle if you can size this wick a little bit better. I would hate for you to give up this gorgeous style of candle with this unique wave wick. I would hate for you to give up that. So I would start with what you've got and just try to adjust the sizing on it. Maybe you can get a thinner one or a shorter one, but if you do have problems with that, you might be forced to have to try some type of different wick arrangement. I would be really, really curious, since you've sent these products in, what changes you've already made. And if you try any of these, I would love to hear some feedback on the changes you made and whether or not any of them are helping. So that wraps up the general feedback on these. Let's get to this after letter. All right, the question from the first letter was, 2 of the 3 different candles contain the same wax formulation. Which one was different? I believe I said it was this large tin candle. Yes, I did. It was just obviously firmer. And yes, that was the correct one. The 14-ounce 10 candle, this large guy here, is the one that contained a higher percentage of harder waxes due to the diameter of the vessel and wick combination. So one thing you could do is increase the amount of beeswax in this one. That might increase the melt point. So you could experiment more with the wax versus changing the wick up too much. Again, this one's just going to take some experimenting. As far as what size wick is in the 14-ounce candle, I had no idea because I don't use those wicks. I wasn't sure even how they measured those. But it looks like it is a wave wick measuring 30 millimeters by 120 positioned side by side. Okay, so there's actually 2 of them connected together. So yeah, really cool concept, really unique. I do enjoy the look of this one a lot. Just work on the sizing a little bit. All right, and then there was a couple questions that she made guesses on about what I would think or like about a few things. And the first question was what fragrance that she thought I would like the most. My favorite was Adventurous, which we talked about, and her favorite was Adventurous. Okay, she said it's the vetiver that stood out the most, but she was torn and almost chose the fresh citrus. She knows me well. I do talk a lot about citrus on the channel. I've had a lot of people send me like lemon fragrances, and so I've mentioned that I really like that. However, I know I've also mentioned a few videos that one of my favorite fragrances is vetiver. It's kind of a polarizing scent. I love it. The Adventurous one was definitely my favorite, and she nailed that one perfectly. So good job, great guess. And then the last one was, which wick and vessel combination do I think, or does she think I would like the most? She thought that I would like the matte black glass with the spiral wick. This was the one, the matte black that had the tube wick. Close, that would have been my second choice. It did burn very well. So like I said, overall, if I was picking performance, I would go with that one. And I do actually kind of like that wick better than the standard maybe wood wick. I'm not real sure. I don't know that I have a preference there, but I really just enjoy that smoky glass one with the cork lid. I'll show another picture of that if you need a refresher. That was definitely my favorite one. So she went 2 for 3, which was, I think, what I did. So we both went 2 for 3, not too shabby. Thank you all for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoy these videos. Let me know if you do in the comments section. I've almost completely caught up on reviews, which means I'll start to open them up for some new ones again. And I've got some news coming up about some other resources that are going to be released soon. So stay tuned for that. If you're not a subscriber to the channel, be sure to subscribe below because that is the fastest and only really surest way you're going to know about some of these big changes. And these are resources that I'm rolling out specifically for you all. So they're meant to help other candle makers. If you think you're subscribed, check below just in case, because sometimes YouTube will just randomly unsubscribe people. So double check, give this video a thumbs up if you like it, and I'll see you all next time. Thanks.